What's good, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the channel. I'm LotusAsakura, the one who never knows best, and in today's video I'm actually bringing some pretty pleasant news, some surprising news, in fact, regarding Tekken 8 in Season 2. As I'm sure most of you all watching this video are aware, we recently had a Tekken talk where they showcased a lot of what Season 2 was going to have to offer. Well, I shouldn't say a lot, showcased a little of what Season 2 had to offer, and frankly speaking, it was very disappointing for the vast majority of people who watched that stream, myself included. A lot of the changes that we were shown, we were not big fans of, and there's been a lot of outcry and pushback from the community. Some constructive, some not so constructive. But we just got a overview today talking about some things that we can expect and some changes coming to the game that I think is pretty interesting and worth talking about. So before we get into that, let's take a look over at this. We had this tweet that came out from Harada, and my camera's not on screen. Let me go ahead and fix that. Boom. We had this tweet from Harada that reads, he's quoting a player right here saying that, bro, stop listening to players and pro players and blah, 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 right? Which this comment came from a place of ignorance, I would say, but it's not really that important. But he responds to it and says, in any case, regarding the recent increase in discussions among players, I have personally initiated an urgent discussion and asked the team to deliberate on how to respond. Regardless of the player's title, I take this as an opinion from the Tekken fan community. Of course, I will analyze which group, from beginners to advanced players, is expressing that opinion. I will also consider whether the opinion comes from the majority or a minority, which is very important. It's not necessarily true that the opinion of advanced players is always best for the game. Sure. For example, if that were the case, Tag 2 should have sold better and been more successful. On the other hand, just because an opinion is from a minority doesn't mean it should be ignored. Well, these are just general statements. And I feel where he's coming from with this, and I basically agree, because you're constantly trying to find a balance with games like this between the casual and the competitive community. I would argue that Tekken 8 is leaning extremely hard in the casual direction and not worrying about as much like the competitive scene, which is why you see so many players disappointed or speaking negatively on the game and on Season 2 so far, even though we haven't played it for ourselves yet. Always remember, got to keep that open mind. But yeah, there's a reason for that. Anyway, he says all that, and then the next day, he and the Tekken account and everybody tweets out this right here. So here we have a balanced overview for Tekken 8 Season 2 about battle system adjustment policy for version 2.0. In Season 1, offensive options utilizing the heat system had become somewhat formulaic, making it difficult for players to express their individual playstyles. Additionally, the advantages for the attacking player during the heat state were often too great, yeah, you don't say, leading to one-sided match developments, an issue we've acknowledged. And I've expressed this myself before, where it feels like oftentimes in Tekken 8, it's extremely common for it to just be a completely one-sided match where it's a perfect and a singular round, or you beat somebody 3-0, then they beat you 3-0, and it's like there's a back and forth, but it's like on a game-to-game basis as opposed to like round-to-round or throughout an individual round itself. Anyway, with that in mind, Season 2 introduces a wide range of updates to the battle system and significant adjustments and new moves for each character based on the following three guiding principles. So this isn't like in-depth patch notes for the patch itself coming. We'll probably be getting that in the next 2 days, because obviously the patch is about to be here in about 3 days. But Season 2 adjustment policy. Number 1, expanding strategic options with the heat system. Activating heat provides a major advantage, creating opportunities to pressure opponents with mid-low mix-ups. However, characters lacking strong standing low attacks have been unable to fully capitalize on this advantage. To address this, we've made it possible to transition into a crouching state after a successful heat engager hit by inputting down back, down, or down forward, giving players more options to apply pressure. And this I find interesting because like they openly already admitted that they really did it because Anna specifically is a character that capitalizes very well on full crouch mix-ups, and they added it, you know, so that she could benefit from that. As I mean, obviously other characters will as well, but it's like there's more to Tekken than just mid-low. There's also like very powerful highs in this game and throws, and there are characters with throw mix-ups or unbreakable throws. So it's not like that was like the mid-low mix-up is the only thing that was there. I get it, you want to have every character be able to take advantage of the situation. I just think that the advantage on block is very extreme in this game, and full crouch mix-ups could feel pretty toxic coming from this as well compared to what on top of what we already have to deal with, but it is what it is. Additionally, certain characters can outperform heat smash or heat burst from unique stances, enhancing combo variety and mind games during neutral. For characters who previously had limited tactical options during heat, we've introduced new heat exclusive moves to make their heat state more appealing and dynamic. So I'm going to assume that this goes for characters like Lee, for example, who doesn't really have a whole lot going for him when he's in heat. I've been of the opinion that Reina's heat was fairly weak, which, you know, I was willing to accept. It's more so just something that like I made as a statement, because Reina's a very, very powerful character in my opinion. She's not like quite top 5. Who knows what she'll be in Season 2, but maybe in the top 10 to top 15 range, I think Reina could be. I think she's a very, very strong character with some very, very powerful tools. So her like not having good lows, like not having the craziest heat ever, like wasn't that big of a deal. Clearly there making up for those weaknesses in season 2 based off things we've already seen. But yeah, so it seems like characters who didn't really have the best heat will be getting new moves to take advantage of in season 2. Next, rebalancing offense and defense within the heat system. To address overly one-sided match dynamics, we've reduced chip damage across the board during the heat state where its impact was most pronounced, which is a change that I'm very much looking forward to. I've said before, I've gone on record that I was not a fan of how much chip damage was in the game, and also I was not a fan of how much recoverable health was in the game. I feel like those two things kind of go hand in hand. I understand why one exists because the other existing and everything like that, but I was kind of the opinion that both could stand to be toned down. They're not exactly toning down the recoverable life. In fact, it looks like they're actually increasing it, which we'll touch on that in just a moment. But reduced chip damage, I think, is a plus. Additionally, in endgame scenarios, it had become common to secure KOs by landing chip damage via heat dash followed by a quick finishing move, limiting creative decision making. Where basically you just chip, and then you just go for like a low poke or a mid poke in order to end the round, as opposed to being more creative, with your offense and everything like that. And yeah, looking at you, Kuma, specifically, right? Other characters are doing this as well. I mean, pretty much everybody is when you're in heat, but there are some who are abusing it way better than others. We've also made adjustments to how recoverable health works. Now, even damage taken while grounded will leave recoverable gauge. This not only softens the offensive pressure of heat, but also makes its defensive merits more tangible, giving defending players more opportunities to recover and fight back. And this is one of the things where I'm going to try to remain open-minded. Okay, I can't say exactly how I feel until I've played it and experienced it for myself. I got to keep that in mind. But on paper, I'm not a fan of this, because what this is basically saying, what I'm getting from this is that if I'm interpreting this correctly, when they say, I lost my place. I also wasn't scrolled down enough, so hopefully my camera wasn't blocking. Even damage taken while grounded will leave recoverable gauge. From my interpretation, this doesn't mean like when you're on the ground, like after you've been knocked down. This means while you are still, like while your feet are on the ground. So while you're not being juggled. The way Tekken 8 currently works with the recoverable health is that when both opponents are just standing there, right? If you hit your opponent and don't launch them, like if I do like Reina's Hell Sweep or like her down forward 1-2, the damage that you take is like true damage or like pure damage, right? You don't have any recoverable gauge. But if I hit you with a down 4-2 or an electric and proceed to do a combo, you start building a certain amount of gray life that is recoverable. That is your recoverable gauge, your recoverable health, right? The way I'm seeing this is that now even just regular pokes and hits while you're both still standing are going to leave recoverable health, which I'm opposed to, just because I just felt like there's too much recoverable health in the game in the first place. But since they're reducing the amount of chip damage in the game overall, maybe it'll balance out and it won't be so bad. Time will tell. Like I said, I can't speak on it too much just on paper, just like not necessarily philosophically, but just like in theory, conceptually, I don't like that change, but we'll see how big of a deal it really is when we get our hands on it for ourselves. Beyond that, this not only softens the defensive pressure of heat, but also makes the defensive measures more tangible, giving the defender players more opportunities to recover and fight back. Moreover, heat dashes have long, numerous benefits, particularly when used from heat engagers with power crush properties. However, this created a gap in power between characters and often led to unbalanced mind games. To address this, we've removed the power crush property from most heat engagers or replaced them with other moves, except in a few cases where it's part of a character's identity. This is a very, very, very welcome change. This is something I was super excited about. They touched on this in a previous Tekken talk, and I jumped out of my chair, I think. I was very, very excited about this. Victor, Azucena, maybe even Asuka, characters like that have these power, like, gotta go. But there are some exceptions. Jack 8, Kuma and Panda, Leo, whose unique stances retain power crush properties on their heat engagers. I think this is at least more acceptable. This one at least makes a little bit more sense as an easier pill to swallow. They say exceptions include characters like, so that could mean that there are more characters beyond these that, retain these properties. They just listed a few off the top. We'll see. I don't know off the top of my head every character in the game that had like a stance, power crush, whatever, that was a heat engager. But there is that. Moving forward, improvements in controls to bolster defensive techniques and provide more enjoyable play. So touching on a little bit of that defense that we were supposed to hear about, right? Historically in Tekken, it was not possible to sidestep toward the foreground while in a crouching state. This created situations where, for example, a string that could be avoided from the one-player side on the left became unavoidable from the two-player side on the right, leading to imbalances and mind games unrelated to player skill or knowledge. So you might have a situation where you're like at a certain amount of frame advantage or disadvantage, And if you're on player one side, you're supposed to be able to sidestep right in order to beat this string or this move, but you can't because you're on player one. Apparently, this is something that was a scripting issue way back in the day, and it's just something that they never really fixed. I think they mentioned this in the Evo FGC video that Harada, Michael Murray, and Nakatsu did. And they just said it's just kind of something that's like, oh, it was like a technological limitation back in the day, and we just never changed it. And so for the first time ever in Tekken, they're fixing it to where now you can sidestep into the foreground. So that'd be sidestep right on player one and sidestep left on player two. This is a game changer for a lot of different matchups and scenarios, because there's a lot of situations where you just kind of had to eat that because there's something that tracks the one side but not necessarily the other, and you can't step into the foreground. So it's like, okay, I just have to block this. You know what I mean? In season 2, this issue has been resolved. Players can now sidestep toward the screen even while crouching, ensuring that movement options are consistent regardless of side. And Nakatsu actually has a tweet, a thread of tweets that demonstrate this that we'll take a look at momentarily. Additional quality of life improvements include input buffering at the start of rounds, allowing players to execute a move the instant the round begins, input buffering for sidesteps, even during recovery or stun states, so players can buffer movement and execute it seamlessly once able to act. The input buffer at the start of rounds is something I'm a big fan of. I like to start a lot of rounds off with just a single jab, but because there's currently no buffer, sometimes you might do a jab, but if you're not frame perfect with your input, you might eat a 13, 14 frame move, which in theory should lose to a 10 frame jab, but they might have just been able to do their input a better time than you. And so you lose to it. So there's been plenty of times where I've done like a jab and I lose to like a down 4-2 or an electric, or something a lot slower, like a counter hit move where it's like I did the fastest move in the game. Well, generally speaking, the fastest move. There are a few exceptions, right? But the fastest generic tool in the game, and I'm losing to a 14 frame move. Why? So the input buffer is welcome to me. When it comes to the side steps, time will tell on this one how I feel. My initial impression was, oh, it's just going to allow players to just like blindly be mashing sidestep while they're blocking something and just kind of get out of jail for free. But the thing to keep in mind is that obviously certain strings are only steppable to certain sides, as we're about to demonstrate momentarily here. And that's kind of where the skill and knowledge will still come into play. As opposed to necessarily just having the best timing when it comes to that kind of thing. So the timing factor might be taken out a little bit, but you still have to have some level of knowledge of what your opponent is doing. Although I guess I will say that at this point, it more so just becomes like you can mash it one way, and if it doesn't work, it's like, all right, well, now I'm just going to do it the other direction next time I'm in that situation, and hopefully it works, which could also just serve as a way for players to learn, you know what I'm saying, as well. So, I don't have strong feelings on it. It is what it is. We'll see how it plays out. These changes aim to improve the overall responsiveness and fluidity of control, helping players of all levels enjoy the game more comfortably. Then, regarding future adjustments. Additionally, in order to address issues pertaining to the large frame advantage on heat activation and the excessive strength of heat dash, the development team is currently in the final stages of making adjustments geared toward reevaluating aspects that impact the strength of offense and also a focus on improvements in defense. These adjustments are scheduled to be completed by the opening of TWT 2025 on May 9th. So while they won't be in the patch when season 2 officially goes live in just a few days, within the month, we should be getting a brand new patch on top of the season 2 patch that adjusts the strength of heat engagers and heat dash, probably nerfing the frame data on them a little bit so that they're not quite as advantageous as they are. I'm sure they'll still be plus. I'm sure they'll still lead to mix-ups. I'm sure they'll still be strong, but right now they're extremely strong. And the offense is very one-sided, which is something that we've reiterated over and over again on this channel, and many other players and creators have reiterated throughout Tekken 8's lifespan thus far. Offense is just incredibly powerful, which strong offense isn't inherently a bad thing. It's just very, very one-sided in this game, and that, in my opinion, is a bad thing. So they will be doing some things, focusing on improvements in defense. Even if they just do things where it's just nerfing the offense, I think that matters a lot and goes a long way. But time will tell exactly what they do when it comes to that. And then we have some throw mechanic adjustments based on community feedback. So, changes to throw mechanics. In Season 2, to address the difficulty of countering throws, the following adjustments have been implemented. Loosening the input window for throw breaks using 1+2. This change aims to reduce instances where players fail to break throws despite successfully predicting them, particularly due to the difficulty of executing simultaneous button presses. So, in previous Tekken games, there was a larger input window for hitting 1+2 that allowed you to break the throw. For whatever reason, the window for that has gotten tighter, and so typically, most especially overseas players, right? Korea and Japan and whatnot, they play on arcade stick, and a lot of players in the Americas and in other countries as well play on arcade stick. But let's just say most stick players, they don't normally set, and some do, but they don't normally set a button bind to 1+2. They just hit their 1 and 2 buttons at the same time, and a lot of players have gotten really, really good at that. Now, I myself I have my R2 button set to 1+2. I have a button bind for that. And I'm sure a lot of you guys out there probably have a button bind as well, whether you're on a regular PS5 controller or if you're on a hitbox or whatever the case is, you might have a bind for that. A lot of players don't. And in this game, it has gotten significantly harder, which is ironic considering how much easier other things have gotten, to consistently break throws doing that. And so now what they're doing is loosening that input window. I just hope that all they're doing is reverting it to the window of like a previous game and not creating a significant gap to where they do something silly where now you can plink 1 and 2 and get a throw break on a 1+2 and simultaneously option select breaking 1 throws and 2 throws, because then if you do, you know what I'm saying? Because like that would be very silly, but I wouldn't be shocked if it happened. So surely all they're going to do is revert the window to like the window of a previous game. I don't know exactly how many frames that is to be specific, but yeah. Moving on, increased recovery for whiff normal throws, so just your generic homing throws, right? They've increased the whiff recovery by 6 frames, so players will have an easier time punishing opponents who miss their throws, especially when using crouches or backdashes to evade. I welcome that. The only thing that's interesting to me is that with increasing the whiff recovery, it seems like they're kind of incentivizing you to duck throws more as well, which, okay. But if you do duck a throw, you're going to be able to punish it a lot easier and more consistently. And if you're a character with any kind of while standing launcher, you're probably going to launch players every single time if you duck a throw. However, considering that throws are often ineffective against opponents who can't react and break them upon seeing the animation, additional benefits are being provided to the player attempting the throw. So, when a throw break is successfully performed, the thrower will recover 1 point of recoverable health. So if you do a throw and your opponent breaks it, you will recover 1 point of HP, which seems negligible. Almost like why even bother, but sure. And when a throw break is successfully performed, the player that was grabbed will receive 5 HP. So if you break a throw, you get 5 HP back if you have 5 recoverable health, if you have 5 points worth of gray health. Sure. I think that's great. It's actually the exact opposite kind of you know, concept of losing health for breaking a throw, which they address right here. And this is why I opened this video up saying that they actually listened to us and that I was pleasantly surprised and everything like that, and why I titled this video the way that I did. Revised adjustment after community feedback. After the initial announcement, the development team received feedback from players and reconsidered one of the proposed adjustments. It was concluded that imposing a disadvantage on the defender for executing a successful throw break would be excessive, as throw breaking is a high skill mechanic that reflects a player's practice and proficiency. You don't say. Really? Oh yeah? Anyway, as such, the following spec will be scrapped in an upcoming patch. When a throw break is successfully performed, a player that was grabbed will receive 5 points of recoverable health damage. So they are completely scrapping the idea that when a player breaks a throw while the thrower is in heat, you take 5 chip damage. Thank the Lord, because in my opinion, and the opinion of like, it seems literally everyone else, that was an incredibly stupid idea in the first place. Yes, punish me for successfully performing a defensive mechanic or, you know, option and reading or reacting to my opponent's throw. Like that, what? It made no sense. It made no sense. A lot of people were very upset about that. There was a lot of outcry, backlash, and pushback on the Tekken talk as a whole, but especially that point in particular. That was one where everyone's like, all right, bro, y'all are going too far. And they're walking it back. And oftentimes when we get certain updates or statements or patches or whatever in games, I want to give developers and companies credit, but I also don't want to give them too much credit, because a lot of times I'm like, this is it should have been like this, or you know, you don't get praise necessarily for doing what you were supposed to, you know what I'm saying, stuff like that. I can't think of the exact phrase I like to use a lot right now, it's escaping me. But one thing I will say is that it takes a lot of accountability, and it's very surprising to see the willingness to do this, because I feel like a lot of times developers are incredibly stubborn and refuse to acknowledge when they've made a mistake. And when the community talks about how badly they feel about certain changes or whatever, they don't go back on it. And if they do address it, they don't necessarily like scrap their original idea entirely or go back to the way things were. Case in point, right? Super Saiyan Goku and Dragon Ball FighterZ. You guys know I reference Dragon Ball FighterZ all the time, right? Obviously, as it was the game I built my channel up off on, is the one that I've played the most in my lifetime up to this point. In Dragon Ball FighterZ, at one point, Super Saiyan Goku's 2M got nerfed, his crouching medium kick, right? It was a very strong normal, but it wasn't overpowered. But we memed about it because it was a strong normal. I don't think anyone genuinely thought that it needed to be nerfed or tweaked or anything like that. It was a good move. It was a good normal. It was very, very strong, but it wasn't like overpowered or broken. I don't think anybody thought that, but we memed about it because it's funny, haha, good move. Eventually, they nerfed it, and they nerfed it pretty hard. And the entire community was like, yo, we were just joking. Like, it's not that deep. It wasn't that serious. Like, change it back, whatever. And after a decent amount of time passed, they eventually did buff that normal, but they never made it as good as it was again, like ever. And to this day, it still is a shell of its former self. Now, it's significantly better than how it was at one point because they nerfed it pretty harshly, way too much. But it's something that never needed to be nerfed in the first place. And so they were willing to admit, or to some degree acknowledge that, hey, we kind of made a mistake here, but they never just straight up reverted the change. And I feel like it's very seldom do we see a developer just completely revert a change or even scrap one altogether before it even actually comes to the game. Off the top of my head, I can't even think of a single time where I've ever seen something like this, where we got a patch note or a sneak peek or a look or something, anything like that. And then they were like, actually, you know what? We heard you guys. You're right. We're not even going to go through with that. You know what I'm saying? Maybe it has happened, but I can't even think of one off the top of the dome. So they do get some praise from me. They do get some kudos for that. And hopefully this is a sign of more to come and their willingness to actually listen to player feedback and take into consideration the things that we're saying and understanding that most players only have the game's best interest at heart. Again, you can't listen to everybody and you have to be very selective about how you do listen to and weigh it differently depending on their investment, their skill level, their knowledge of the game, whatever, which Harada did mention in that opening statement. But yeah, so while these changes will be applied as soon as possible, there might be a slight delay following the release of version 2.0. The adjustments are scheduled to be completed before the opening of TWT 2025 on May 9th. So when Season 2 does launch, the chip throw breaks will be there, but it is something that they're intending to remove hopefully sooner rather than later. Next, we can finally get to the tweet. I didn't even have this one up. The tweet from Nakatsu where it says, in Season 2, I have spoken in the Tekken Talk Live and interview videos about the upcoming defensive improvements. However, I feel that I haven't fully conveyed the details and the significance of these changes. Season 2 introduces major system changes to sidestepping and movement mechanics. You can now sidestep toward the foreground while in a crouching state. You can complete the input for a sidewalk using input buffering. I would like to explain how these changes will affect matches using some video samples. Of course, I fully understand that the effectiveness of these adjustments may vary depending on factors like the character's size, their sidestep and sidewalk performance, and the axis situation when moves hit or are blocked. There may also be scenarios where a safer and simpler option than sidestepping is available. Please keep in mind that these videos are simply reference examples to demonstrate how the increased sidestep and sidewalk options will contribute to defensive improvements. The sample video and explanation can be found in the thread. And then here he gives us several examples. We'll just take a look at the first two because this video's already gone on longer than I intended it to. But in this first example, we have Jin versus Nina, right? So the first example involves left side Jin getting hit by Nina's stiletto heel, which is down back 3. In this situation, Nina's uppercut, which is her jab down 4-1-2, is a staple follow-up that takes advantage of her frame advantage. Until Season 1, characters could only perform moves sideways into the background from a crouching state, making it extremely difficult to evade the uppercut into jab using a sidestep to the background. However, in Season 2, since it is now possible to perform a sidestep toward the foreground from a crouching state, evading the uppercut jab becomes significantly easier to compare to using a sidestep into the background. As a result, Nina will need to consider moves that counter a sidestep toward the foreground, limiting her stable options despite having a frame advantage. This gives Jin more defensive options, making it harder for Nina to apply pressure consistently. So just introducing counterplay to the situation and making it so that Nina can't just default to something all the time and it always works, because now they're able to take advantage of this. So this is something that didn't matter as much online because both players could always pick their side and you could both be player one or whatever. Now, of course, you could still end up on a different side, and then it comes into play, like if you've been thrown or whatever, or just ended up sidewalking, sidestep, whatever the case is, right? You end up on the other side. But this is a huge game changer, especially for offline players, but all players to some degree, right? So here we see the exact situation play out. We have Nina's down back 3, which is +4 on hit. And then we have her down 4-2-1, right? So currently, you can't step this to the right when you're on player 1 side. And when you step left, you still get hit. But now when we side swap, you can see that since Jin can actually sidestep to the right now because it's to the background, he can get around it. But in Season 2, you'll actually be able to do it even from player 1 side. So it's a pretty big deal, pretty big game changer. He's able to get a hop kick punish because of that. Also my fault. I realize that sometimes I'm saying sidewalk or sidestep when I mean the other, but hopefully you still understand. But yeah. And so likewise, he's able to sidestep to the right and still get the punish. The next example we'll take a look at is Lydia versus Steve. Very similar concept, but this time more from an offensive standpoint as opposed to a defensive standpoint. So with Lydia, right, she has her, what moves is this? Just down 2, right? Yeah, the second example features Lydia on the left side after landing her move Lame Duck, which is her down 2. It has a guaranteed follow-up or whatever, which is, you know, her shoulder or elbow rather. But right now, as it currently stands, this move leaves her at -4. And Steve goes for a down forward 1 that she's able to step to the left. But you see, if she switches sides, left is now the foreground, so she can no longer step it. And if you step to the right, you still get hit. But now, in season 2, you'll see, same as before, still able to step to the left. And now, even though that the left is now the foreground, when this situation happens, steps to the left and is able to avoid Steve's move. So, like I said, I think this is a pretty big deal. So yeah, there's a couple more examples here. There's a Jin versus Xiaoyu example and a Kazuya versus Safina example, but you pretty much get the idea. I somehow yapped and rambled on way longer. I thought for show I'd have this video be under 20 minutes. Should have known better. But yeah, hopefully I didn't ramble too much and you guys did find this video interesting, because I certainly found it interesting seeing all of it, especially with them deciding to scrap the idea of the chip damage throws. So yeah, I'm still looking forward to season 2. I can't wait to see what the patch notes say. But yeah, man, what are you guys thinking? How you feeling? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Hit this video with a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you haven't already so you can stay tuned for all this content that I'm bringing you. With all that being said, that's pretty much all I have today. Remember, nothing can happen until you swing the bat. Later.